Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me and you're having a wonderful day. While we are waiting for Nikhil, we are starting our second podcast actually about business and especially businesses who are around in Florida. Today, we would be talking about a very, very interesting topic. And while I was preparing for this topic, it was certainly in my mind that this should not be only for employers, but we would be talking about people or remote workers or employees who are working from home. And one of my very good friends, Nikhil Joshi, who is an attorney, a lawyer, but he represents employees mostly. But today he said he's going to talk about remote workers. He's going to talk about some of the things, what remote employees should think before they go on, start working from home. So we would have some interesting conversation today. I'm waiting for Nikhil to join us soon, and I think he is right here. He is joining the stream, and with me we have Nikhil Joshi. Nikhil, you're looking very handsome. Thank you very much for joining the stream. Just push you a little bit camera so that we can see. Perfect. So we have Nikhil Joshi here, and Nikhil, I was actually reading today's newspaper, and it was so funny that we have news coming in about how jobless people are increasing. Like today, it was U.S. hits 50 million jobless people, and this was a little bit worrisome for me. Mm-hmm. Florida itself has 67,000 new claims, are higher than at any time during this recession period. Right. But the good news is it's 20% decrease from the week before. So it's the state's lowest overall number now since the pandemic has begun. And a lot of people are not just, it's not that they are being fired, like especially from small businesses, physicians, IT companies, professional services, like ourselves. We had like 2 employees whom we wanted to retain, and we did not want to fire them, but they just felt that they were under some kind of invisible fear, and they just left by themselves, and we don't know. They were great employees. We wanted to hire them. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what kind of fear is going on at this moment, and I don't know how you want to address this fear, and what are you looking at as a firm? How do you see yourself into this kind of uncertainty and the environment, which is very, very crucial for both remote workers as well as employees who are hiring remote workers. So let's start a little bit conversation about this, what's going on, and then we'll come to the questions.
Absolutely. So thank you again for the opportunity. Those of you who may not know, I'm a board-certified labor and employment law attorney here in Florida for almost 25 years now. So enjoy what I do. And yes, this is an extremely challenging time for businesses and employers across the country, but certainly here in Florida. And the sorts of topics and issues that you just brought up, Kunal, involving workers whom many businesses want to retain, but the challenge of having them feel confident and comfortable to come to work, and the resistance that many businesses are seeing from those same people to actually come to work is extremely common issue right now being seen by businesses. And it's in the broad sense, certainly we can understand how people feel fearful because of the virus. They don't want to be out, so to speak, in the main community. However, the reality of the situation with what we know based upon CDC guidelines and Department of Health guidelines is as long as certain steps are being taken, then business owners and their employees, as well as their customers, patients, clients, whatever the nature of your industry is, should be comfortable at least engaging in normal operations. Okay. But in order to get to that stage of comfort, there are certain steps that employers have to take. And those steps include ensuring that the workplace is sanitized on a routine basis, that masks are worn amongst employees, and of course we know about the social distancing rule. And you try as hard as possible to avoid any sort of mass congregation while you're indoors in your facility. And as long as you're doing that, then there's nothing much more that can be done to maintain safety in the work. Okay. We've had a number of folks who have taken called about concerns. Employees don't want to work. We're doing everything we can. They just don't want to come to work. Can we force them to come to work? Can we require them to come to work? And the answer to that, short answer is yes. But in order to get to that stage, we've got to have taken some steps to build the confidence of the workforce. And some of the steps that I recommend that business owners do take to build that is, post a notice on your very front door. If you have a reception desk, if you have any other common area, you post notices that require anyone entering the building, whether they be employees or guests, to understand that they must acknowledge that they've not traveled last 14 days, they're not showing symptoms, they don't have fever, et cetera, so that, and if they're going to agree to maintain the employer's expectations, which is wearing a mask or other PPP if you need to, as well as maintaining social distancing. If you do that, and then they enter the building, then and as an employer, we're maintaining that expectation of our employees while they're inside the building. And at that point, there's nothing more that really you can do. Okay. Now, one thing that can be done as well, depending upon your model, how you operate your business, is some employers, many of us have come to learn that, we can actually work from home. We don't need to be paying a mortgage or a rent like we are right now. But, there's a certain professionalism that comes with working out of an office, and I think people still prefer that. However, what we have learned is that a number of business models have the flexibility to allow people to work remotely. And I know that's one of your questions. So in that context,
Would you excuse me for a moment? I think the light is not coming well. Would you mind closing your window in the back?
Sure.
That would give us more clarity when we can see our readers. No, the window behind you.
Yeah, okay, I can do that. Hold on one second.
Thank you. So while Nikhil is doing that, I know this was the last minute. So thank you guys for keeping us here. We would expect you guys to write your, if you have any questions, any kind of a small business, if you have any questions, please feel free to put something in the chat window in the side. I would look at it and I would ask a live question from Nikhil so that we can take some professional opinion from him and understand what's going on. But some of the businesses, what we were talking about, and this is so strange, that if you see the stocks for companies like Slack, Now, Zoom, they're like skyrocketing. And we are evolving into a new economy. So, these are all very impactful, and it's going to be in a long run. They are going to define the new way of doing business. So one of the main reasons why I wanted to pick up Nikhil's brain, because he actively advises, consults to smaller companies, and these companies are using some of those tools which I'm talking about to manage their remote workforce. So this is much better, Nikhil. This is perfect. I was talking to the audience and I said, if they're following the stocks for Zoom, stocks for Slack, stocks for Now, these companies are like skyrocketing, and everywhere it is basically defining that this is kind of going to be the new way of doing business. Mm-hmm. So at one point, I think it is good in the interest of those professional companies where people can work from home, but at the other side, we still have those employers, convenience stores, gas stations, people, even medical offices. All of their staff cannot work from home. So they have to have like a dual policy or what? I mean, how would they manage their work policies and their handbooks? Or if they have any kind of, internal laws. I mean, it would be very difficult. Like in our situation, we have a separate, handbook probably for people who are working at our office. But at the same time, we have different rules for people who are working from home.
Yes, that's a great question. And, in this environment, especially now, but even before COVID-19, there's been a long evolution over the many years towards telecommuting, teleworking, some people working from home. And now it's become more pronounced just because of the nature of the virus. And yes, as an employer, you can absolutely have two sets of expectations if you chose to do so. But your overarching policies apply no matter whether or not somebody's working from home or they're physically in your building. Okay, all policies still apply no matter what. And you have to be careful in that context when people are working from home, because there's a greater opportunity and more risk for the employer that the employee could do certain things that can backfire on the employer, could cause some risk in terms of time management, which can lead to some wage issues, whether you have to owe them overtime or not. So again, if you allow people to work from home, you do want to still manage them like you would if they're physically present in the building. Okay.
Wow.
Because there's a lot of risk there in a number of other ways, especially if they're not salaried exempt employees. And oftentimes,
that's where the bigger confusion is.
Yeah.
Some people are hourly, some people are salaried.
Right.
And we have, so like if you talk about small businesses or IT companies where people have individual productivity levels, benchmarks. So it would be very difficult for us to manage somebody. I know you can manage it by seeing what's their productivity level, what's their benchmarks, but this work from home fatigue. I mean, I was reading another article today, and then people are talking about that even people are having fatigue while they're working from home.
Yes.
And I don't understand how, because now they are taking care of their families more. They are doing recreation at home. They can do a work-home balance very well. But despite of that, it would be very difficult for employers to manage the financial expectations or seeing a financial impact on the business while managing both kind of employees. So
that's true. And the bottom line is, as an employer, you have the discretion to run your railroad the way you see fit. Okay, so you have the same expectation in terms of productivity, efficiency, performance, behavior, anything that we would expect of somebody sitting 5 feet away from me. I can have the same expectation of somebody at home, and that's important to maintain, because the minute you as a business owner choose to create some more lax rules of flexibility is then when the door opens up to having more problems, okay? Because then you're going to have people in the facility say, how can you treated Joey differently than Jane? And we don't want that. So we must try to be as consistent, mainly because, first of all, for your business operations, this is what I expect. I'm paying you for a job, okay? Out of my payment for you, I'm expecting certain levels of high productivity and performance and professionalism. And I'm expecting to get that. If I don't get that, then not only am I losing out, so is my customer base, so is my client base, whomever that they're supposed to be servicing. So it becomes a larger issue, okay? The legalities of working from home are numerous, because there's questions of workers' comp liability, there's questions of are they tracking their time so we can pay them properly, and other sorts of liability issues that are probably a whole other topic for another day. But what we're seeing today is there are people who were working physically in the building. Then after March, April, once we shut down, then went home, went to work in the home or wherever else they are, out of safety. Okay. Now we're having the problem of employers, businesses like yours, businesses that are of those who are listening, have set up protocols to ensure that we have a safe working environment. We put a notice on the front door. We don't let people come in. I require people to sign acknowledgement forms, both as employees and visitors, saying that I'm not sick, I'm not showing symptoms, whatever. Come in, protect yourself as a business. But once I protected myself as a business, that's not just legal protection, which is important, but it's also to give everyone who I'm working around confidence that everyone is being treated the same way. Hey, if everyone says that they've not tested positive, they don't have symptoms, then I should be fine working here. Okay? And so the resistance from people who say, I don't want to come to work, is not founded based upon facts. And so what can an employer do in that scenario? To be honest with you, unless they fall in a high-risk category, 65 and above, or they have asthma issues or some illness that really requires them to avoid contact,
so
you can require, they may be. And if you look at the Governor DeSantis' executive
how do you
order,
handle, so is it okay to fire these people? What do you do as an employer?
So, okay, good question. So in terms of, let's just talk generically.
Right.
If someone not high risk, they refuse to come to work, and you've done everything you could to maintain what is being recommended to be a safe working environment, yes, you can discipline them, you can fire them if they choose not to come to work. Okay. One strategy, though, that you could use, and it may work for some employers more than others, is let's say you have a department, customer service representatives, or you have insurance claims representatives, or you have IT folks, and they all sit in one main room working on the computers. Some employers are staggering work schedules. So people come in at different times or different days so that not everyone is working together, but everyone has equal access to the facility. And that way you get people to feel more comfortable when they come in. I'm not going to be closer than 10 feet from somebody else, 5 to 6 feet, whatever the case. So that there are some strategies to additionally make people feel more comfortable. But after taking all of that, if somebody still refuses, and I've had a client who called me from Fort Myers, said the same thing.
Yeah, we have.
No, we stagger, no one's around in this, no one sits next to this guy. This guy has his whole 20-foot office by himself. He still won't come to work. He's scared. So can I fire him? And the answer is yes, you can. Because there's no generalized doctrine that says if I'm fearful, I cannot leave my house. That's not allowed. That's not something that is protected by law. Okay. If someone is generally
OSHA has released some guidance and advisory, right? OSHA has released, especially for medical practices, they have released.
Yes, OSHA has guidance. The CDC has guidance. The Department of Labor has guidance.
Right.
By and large, they're fairly consistent, although it's a difficult challenge for federal agencies to become consistent. The state of Florida Department of Health has guidance. Okay.
Right.
So every department has issued some level of guidance. What I say is this, depending upon the nature of your industry, especially if you're healthcare, you should follow CDC and Florida Department of Health recommendations, which are posted on the website. Because if you do that, then you protect yourself legally.
Well, there is always an excuse somebody can give and then come back and say, hey, my job requires a supervision, or my job, I don't have a resources at home working exactly the same way like you have provided us the resources at office.
Right.
Those are the excuses normally we get, and they are like very naive. People are, you know that people are vacationing on the beach and sending the pictures. You can find their pictures on social media, Instagram, and then he is saying that he is working for you. It's happening all across the board.
So if someone you have the right by your policies to require people to be actually working for you if they're going to be working from home.
Right.
And the same expectation is if you're here physically 9 to 5, you must be physically available between 9 to 5. You're not to be vacationing, going to the beach, or taking anything personal. If you are, first of all, they don't have to be paid for that time. But second of all, you can discipline them if you find out that they are at the beach or doing something different. The other important element to this is if you're home for safety reasons.
Right.
That's the reason why you're working from home. But if you choose to go to the beach, you choose to go someplace else, you're now creating more risk for my employer. Because how do I bring you back into work physically if you have now been congregating around other people?
Very good point. Yes. And they're not understanding that fact.
Another reason why that sort of policy should be put into effect or explained to the employees is that if you work from home, you cannot go anywhere else during that time. It still expects you, when you go out, to wear a mask and social distance, because when time comes and I need you to come back physically to my office, I need you to be able to say, I'm COVID-free. I'm not exposed myself unnecessarily, unless you need to perform essential services. So you have the right to expect that of your employees, even those who work from home. Okay.
So that comes to another point when we talk about paid leaves, sick leaves during this environment, COVID, and how would you consider, what would be considered as a paid leave? But like we have some employees even working in India, globally, they have no computers, they have nothing, they can't do anything, they're just sitting at home doing nothing, getting salary, because we cannot fire them as per the government. And I'm sure there are some guidelines here also, but of course the cases are less in America. More or less everybody has laptop, everybody can work from home. But there are some businesses where they can't work from home and they are on long leave or paid leave or something like that. So what kind of, like, I know you mentioned you can change some of your handbook policies.
Yes.
So give us some ideas, like what kind of like key changes, 4 or 5 changes a handbook, or your professional handbook or rules, like internal HR rules required.
So you, as an employer, a private employer in Florida, you are in an at-will state, which means you have the freedom to change the terms of the employment relationship at any time.
Right.
Okay, as long as you give some sort of notice, which is recommended. But the only obstacles to doing so is if you have an employment contract that requires you to provide something. That's a handwritten contract between two parties, a written contract entered into, signed. Then you might have some restrictions. But even with those contracts nowadays, there are employers who are saying, we are going to suspend the contracts because of COVID's effect on our operations. And we've seen a lot of that myself. So you can do that. There's some risk to it, but by and large, most employees, even those who have an actual contract in writing says this is what I'm entitled to, are willing to sign off on a temporary suspension because they know they're still keeping their job. Okay? And that's important.
So you mean that
it's a win-win. It's a win-win.
As long as you have understanding of hiring or rehiring that employee in future.
Yeah, and I think most employees and employers are trying to, they understand it. Look, this is a tough situation for everybody.
Right.
Businesses are suffering. Revenues are down. So even if I have a job, but if it's at 50% of what I had before, employees are feeling comfortable that, hey, I'm glad I still have my job.
Right.
Okay. But here's what you can do. You can change work schedules. You can say, I'm not going to be 40 hours required. Now I'm going to expect you 20 hours. Or we're going to work 3 days a week, not 5 days a week. You can change, you can even reduce temporarily wage rates. Okay. Because it's a temporary thing. If they're being paid $20 an hour, you can say, I'm going to pay you 15 or 10, whatever. This is temporary during COVID. You can make those changes for temporary reasons. You can also, if somebody is a salaried employee, you can also temporarily take them off a salary and make them hourly for the duration of the COVID situation.
You think that
the only thing about that is that's not illegal. Again, as long as it's not part of a contract, you have much more flexibility. But if somebody's being paid $50,000, $60,000 a year, but right now they can't even perform the services for you, then you can put them on an hourly basis, temporary basis.
So
you can change it. So instead of $50,000 an hour, I'm going to pay you $25 an hour now, which may equate to $50,000 for a full-time employee. Okay. So, but now I only get paid for the actual hours that I report worked. So I don't get the full salary, but I'm going to only get paid for what I actually work. Okay. And that is legal. That is legal. But in the week, keep in mind, if for some reason there's a busy week and this person worked 60, 70 hours, guess what? I do have to pay that person overtime now because I'm paying them on an hourly basis. But you get the flexibility as the employer knowing that, hey, I'm paying hourly basis, so I'm not overpaying somebody as a salary knowing that I don't have that work coming back from me. Okay.
Now, how does these employees take it? How does these employees, what's their view? Sometimes how do they react to this kind of situation? Because nobody wants to compromise on their financial impact on their lives because, and of course, I mean, they are getting some incentives from the state or from the government, but nobody.
It's hard.
But before you answer, let me make you one more change. Your mic settings, your camera, if you click on your camera settings, make it 720 DPI, the definition, high definition. So if you click on your camera setting in front of you,
yeah,
you see high definition camera resolution.
I don't see that opportunity here.
You see in the left where the mic is. There's a three buttons. You see?
Yeah, let me see.
So check the cam settings.
Yep. Okay, I see it now.
Make it 720. It would be much brighter. And then close it. That's perfect. Sorry
about that.
That's okay.
Yeah. So, a question about how do you manage the scenario, right? When you have
because remote workers, we have to think from this perspective, right? It's not just employees only. We have to find a bridge. We have to find a win-win situation for both parties. So we have to create an environment where remote workers also find it fair that our employment conditions are amicable for us to continue our employment for long term for any company.
Right.
And so how are they taking this kind of change in the current environment, and what are the options they have? Like, do they have any legal right to sue the firm or come after the employer? Because there are a lot of people who are on even H-1s. There are employees who are on green card. There are employees on different kind of visa status in this country. So it's not just the one rule covers everybody. Of course, it's different, but again, it all depends on the situations, how they react. So, and they react based on their financial outcomes or financial impact on their personal lives.
Yeah, exactly. And that's each industry, again, has a different dynamic. So when I say this is where the human relations aspect becomes very important, it's even more than legal. Okay. This is a completely novel scenario for all businesses and all lawyers that advise businesses in this scenario right now. What you can say is this, okay, we know as an employer we have the freedom to change the terms and conditions of employment at any time when you're a private employer outside of a contract, okay, as long as it's not for illegal reasons. And what are illegal reasons? Because of my gender, my race, my religion, my disability, national origin, those sorts of issues, okay? So by and large, there's a lot of freedom that the employer has to do what they feel is right to adjust their business model while still keeping people employed as much as possible. Okay. So the tools we talked about before, what I have been seeing, what I've been hearing, by and large, employees are working hand in hand with the employer to see, okay, I'm better off having a job than not. Okay. Now, worst case scenario, if you don't get that level of flexibility from the employee, or some people are concerned, I don't know if I want to do this, then we are seeing some folks who are now leaving the workplace. They're moving on. They're leaving, or they're going on unemployment or what have you. So what the employers are doing is this. This is another strategy that you could use. Florida has a plan which is called short time compensation. Short, TIME. Okay.
Okay.
And what that is it's a feature of the Florida Department of Unemployment, or Reemployment is what we call it, Division for Reemployment. But the idea is that if an employer reduces hours of its employees and a maximum that they can do so is 40%. So if you have a 40-hour-a-week employee, you can reduce it down to 24 hours. You can subtract 16 hours and pay them up to 24. The state of Florida will help compensate for the balance of those 16 hours, so that they still may be paid close to the 40-hour range. Okay. Now that's a program Florida has had even before COVID, well before COVID. But that's an opportunity for the employers that said, let me reduce my employee schedule, but the state might help backfill so that the employee still gets paid almost like a full-time schedule. Okay. So that's one way you can help. The other thing is you do intermittent work. 1 week on, 1 week off, 1 week on, 1 week off, something like that. So that helps reduce the pressure on the business's budget, but at the same time, it keeps the employee employed. Okay, you're seeing that Delta Airlines, United Airlines, major companies are doing things to keep people employed, but they're taking leave 1 week at a time. It's unpaid leave,
Right.
unless they have a bank of paid leave that they can use to help pay for the service. Then they can use that. But once that's exhausted, then it's unpaid. But you still have to pay if you afford benefits like health insurance. You still pay that,
That's
but
true.
your pay is reduced. So that's one less pressure on the business, but the employee still feels like, hey, at least I have a job.
That's true.
That's what at least I have my benefit. They still care about that. And I think 90% of employers and employees are working together. You do have some that feel like I can't do this anymore, but one or two anecdotes I can tell you, which, knock on wood, hopefully continues. Most of the plaintiffs' lawyers that I go opposite to in this part of Florida, who I deal with routinely, are reluctant to take cases against employers that deal with COVID-19. They're doing that more on a philosophical basis because they feel like it's unfair to sue businesses for something when everyone is suffering. Okay? So everyone's trying to navigate a scenario that we don't know how to manage best as employers, I'm saying, not as lawyers, but as business owners. We're trying to do the best we can to survive while keeping our employees in the loop as much as possible, on payroll as much as possible. So a lot of them plaintiffs' lawyers are feeling reluctant to sue business owners right now because of that. Now, one thing to keep in mind, there is the FFCRA, which is the Families First, Coronavirus Relief Act, which is effective as of April 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And that was passed by Congress with respect to those employees who either are sick with the virus and need to get tested, or have symptoms and they don't know what to do, so they have to be quarantined, or they have to take care of their kids who are school-aged and they need to be out of school so they have to manage them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So in order to reduce the burden on the employees, the law requires employers to pay up to 80 hours, 80, for each of those employees to be on paid leave if they meet one of those buckets of time off. Okay, testing for leave, quarantine due to COVID concerns, or around home because of my child.
All kind of businesses or certain size of businesses?
Ironically, any business that has fewer than 500 employees. Fewer than 500.
Well, so that's pretty much everywhere.
The big business lobbyists won when they did with Congress to say we want to be excluded, but anyone fewer than 500. And then there's an extended FMLA leave obligation that applies even if you're not covered by FMLA to those employees who need to be out to care for a child who's at home from school. And that's up to a 12-week paid leave, 2/3 pay. Okay? But the bargain that Congress gave to the business owners is if you in fact give the 80 hours, or you have to give the 2/3 leave for those who are home to care for their kids from school, you get a tax break. You get a tax, what's the word? I'm losing track, but basically again a refund, direct refund from the government for that time off.
So they're incentivizing the business.
So you have to track this time effectively. You got to have good documentation, because later on you're going to want to make sure that your bookkeeper, CPA, whomever that does your tax returns is aware of that, so you can get the tax benefit back. Okay, so if you have employees who are on paid time off covered by the law, then you need to make sure that you track it so that you can get your tax reimbursement accordingly.
And that tracking is like very subjective to how it is reported back, because that's what it is, because it's whatever you are basically trusting your employee how he or she is reporting back. So and that's a
question. Let me just add that many of you out there may have received the PPP loan. Right. So if you have, they've reduced the threshold from 75%, a little bit lower now, for how much has to go towards payroll-related costs.
Right.
But anything that's gone to payroll or employee expenses, insurance benefits, whatever, keep track of that. If you pay people for PTO, time off because of they're ill, that also counts towards a PPP forgiveness. So please keep documented documentation.
Any kind of special incentive, salary, any kind of special bonuses.
Documentation.
And
you
bonus
shouldn't have a problem with the forgiveness.
In it or no? In PPP?
I'm sorry?
You can pay them bonuses or commissions. Like if suppose like we talked about fear. So what we did is I did a little bit, creative. We paid some amount of money to them as a Corona bonus to come out of their fear.
Right.
Gave them a little bit so we just call it a Corona bonus because we wanted people to feel comfortable that they are not going to have a financial impact once we receive the PPP money. And I'm sure they are going to cover that as a part of the salary.
Yeah, so, the PPP guidelines that have been put forth as of now deal with maintenance of the job, salary, wages, keeping people employed. Okay, whether or not a Corona type bonus would be justified in the PPP is not, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Because what they want to know, are we keeping these people employed as close to possible at what they previously made? Okay, you're not required to, but the key is if you kept employment at a certain level and salary at a certain level, even if you had to go up or down a bit, you're going to be fine if you can justify why. But in terms of the additional money you provided with a bonus, great idea because you want these people to come back to work.
Right.
But whether that would be covered for PPP purposes, I don't know the answer.
Okay, got it. So,
it's illegal.
I know. We want it because some of our people, they are not coming to our to office at all. I mean, they have that fear what we talked about. And
it's a great idea. It's a great idea. And so just so you know, there's two separate issues here. PPP forgiveness is baseline.
Correct.
You can do more than baseline. Okay, that's not legal. But
up to 100K, they have a roof.
You can do more than baseline, but whether or not everything above baseline will qualify for PPP, I'm not 100% sure. But that's not likely going to affect your forgiveness. Okay, but what you want to show, here's my PPP account, and I was transferring money into my business account to pay payroll or benefits. If you show that tracking on a consistent basis, you're not going to have an issue. What you did above and beyond that, bonus, whatever,
you have to justify it at some point.
You have flexibility. Yeah. It's not going to be a penalty.
Right. No, you mentioned a little bit about the racial thing, and especially, after this George Floyd case.
Right.
A lot of things going on, and some of the issues which comes to our mind is, of course, minority-owned businesses, and they employ a lot of minorities. I don't know why, but sometimes it happens. Like one of our companies, they have 80% Indian employees, and so I don't know how this is going on during this environment. What's the environment for those kind of companies where the owners are minorities or Indian-owned businesses, or their most employees are minorities or Indians, and sometimes I know there's a movement going on in U.S. to give them a racial kind of identify them from their birth positions, caste. Okay, how do you handle this kind of scenario from an employer perspective? What advice do you give to those employers?
Okay, so as far as today's concerned, federal law and Florida law does not have any affirmative action requirements or any minimum thresholds that you have to have number of African American, Hispanic, Latina, Indian, Chinese, nothing like that. Okay, so you're free to have whatever workforce that there is. The bottom line is this: as an employer, your goal should always be, does this person have the qualifications to do the job that I'm hiring them for? That's it. They can be black, white, brown, purple, Indian, Chinese, Korean, Colombian, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Okay. So there is no minimum requirement that you have to employ anybody.
Right.
Be mindful, though, that if you have a job posting or application and you get a number of applicants, you should make sure that you have a process. You have a job application process and, a process for reviewing those and interviewing those individuals consistently, a consistent approach, so that when you make your decision, it's not based upon because I have a prejudice against a certain category or a preference for a certain category. It's based upon job qualifications and how do they communicate to you in that interview. And you're basing it upon legitimate, non-discriminatory reasons. That's the key. As long as you do that, you won't have a discrimination issue.
No, I understand that, but the discrimination is not not because of what you are following, like the guidelines. Discrimination is, so you remember we spoke about fear in employees' mind, things which is going on during the environment, and then how they react because of the environment. That's not in the hands of an employer. So if I have 20 employees in my office and out of them 12 are Indians, but 8 of them are non-Indians or non-minorities or majorities, it would be very difficult for them sometimes, or few of them, to cope up with the situation, what's going on.
Yeah.
And again, how they react creates a legal situation for an employer. And
so,
in that how to resolve that in everybody's, that becomes a little bit challenging for me. So, and that's the kind of, what my question I was wanted to ask. What do we have as our rights, like employer rights? As long as, do we have to worry about something, or it's like the regular business?
Okay, so good question.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, again, we're the employer, so we set expectations for our workplace. Okay,
right.
Whether it be to the handbook or any other policy, it doesn't have to be just a handbook. I'm expecting, this is my work philosophy, this is my company philosophy, and this is how we're going to treat our customers, our patients, our clients, whatever. And each one of us has a job, which in the big picture is going to serve our customers, our patients, our clients, right?
Right.
So I expect professionalism, I expect competency, and expect, productivity. That's what I want. It's not a complicated thing. That's what I expect in a law firm.
Business expectations, yes.
And part of the professionalism means we expect people to behave accordingly in the office, right, and not be petty, not be this, not be that, but just be professional. Okay? Right. But if somebody deviates from those expectations, here's our policy. Here's our handbook policy. We expect complaints to be brought, and I expect to know what exactly happened so that we can act accordingly as the employer to ensure that our workplace is a comfortable professional working environment. That's right, the key. Right. It's not about anything else. Now, what happens oftentimes, as we see, is employees will use a crutch as a basis to then, because they're upset about something, they will now go after the employer and say, oh, he or she discriminated against me because I'm this, that, or the other, or did sexual harassment, or something like that can happen, right? 8 out of 10 cases, 9 out of 10 cases that I see in those contexts are bogus, but they're based upon some personal agenda somebody has.
Exactly.
Okay? But the problem is that the law, we still as a business owner, as an employer, must do what's required by law to make sure our entire organization feels comfortable that, hey, my employer will take complaints seriously, even the bogus ones. They're going to still investigate it, they're going to look into it, and they're going to take corrective action if we feel we need to take corrective action. All right? As long as we apply that process in every scenario, even if it's bogus, then in the end of the day, you're going to have the upper hand. Okay? The problem happens is when we don't do that, because then the employees will say, there was no reason for me to complain because they wouldn't do anything about it, and it becomes a problem to defend a case like that. All right? Here's what I will say in reality what ends up happening, okay? And I'm going to get to another issue that you said about majority Indian businesses, right, because there's something interesting I need to talk to people on this presentation about. Yeah. But my experience in almost 25 years of doing this is there are people who truly are subjected to real discrimination, race discrimination on the job. We're seeing it right now in the larger community. Race discrimination still exists. There's no doubt about it. Right. Okay. Sex, even some real bad sex discrimination, it still happens, whatever. But those people who are really harmed, this is anecdotal, but I'm giving my experience, they really don't sue the employer because they want to move on in their life. They don't want to deal with the emotional impact. They're tired of it. They don't want to relive everything in a litigation. But the people who have nothing to lose because it's false to begin with, it's a bogus claim. I have nothing to lose. Guess what? I'm going to go to Morgan & Morgan. Right. I'm going to go to such and such attorney because I don't have to do anything. And whatever I get, if I win, they get their fees out of it. I didn't have to pay $1.
Yes.
So they have nothing to lose and they'll pursue it. But the people who have really suffered emotionally won't do it because they have a lot more to lose up here. They don't want to invest in it. So you will see people file cases who really have suffered. Okay, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. But what I'm saying is 8 out of 10 of the cases you see are bogus cases. Most people who really suffered it don't want to relive it. Okay, so we know it's bogus, but we still have to do what's required by law to protect ourselves. Okay, so you must have consistent policies and expectations that if somebody complains, they go up a chain. And you must let your supervisors handle it. You must let people who know about HR handle it. And we must train our supervisor level, especially for a large organization, and you have people in middle management. See, it's just me and my employees here. There's no middle management in my law firm.
Right.
But if you get larger, or it's like your practice forces in so many other businesses, right, where you have middle supervisors,
right,
those people must be trained to recognize what they are hearing and seeing.
That's
because
true.
Those are the people, those supervisor level, if they screw up, their screw up binds you as a business under the law.
That's
because
true.
You put them in a supervisory position.
Right.
It's our obligation to train them.
We are responsible for their acts.
And if they screw up, we are responsible for their actions.
That's true.
So that's why it's important to be consistent and do training. Training is so important for any business on all these issues.
Legal training.
And I do training. Yeah, I do all this side of training all the time. And you'll be surprised how naive, as you said earlier, people are about, well, I didn't know I had to do that. And so we must, as part of your hiring process to protect you, you must hire people and promote people who are going to be supervisors who you know can handle the job. Don't put somebody to become a supervisor or somebody beneath them if they don't have good communication skills and they don't know how to handle problem situations, because then you're going to be in trouble yourself. Now, let me talk about Indian-dominated.
So let me summarize this. So you said training for small.
Okay, go ahead.
You are a small employer. You have a handful of employees. It's very important to have a training by someone like you or certified labor attorney coming in, and just to have annual training or a biannually, some kind of training to handle these kind of issues within the organization to protect.
It's very important.
That's
we also have to protect you. I'm sorry to cut you off. You want them to then sign a document saying, on July 15th, I attended training by Nikhil Joshi or whomever topics covered, and we put a copy of that in the personnel file.
We do that for our HIPAA certification. We do one for training the same way.
Approach you would do in the employment class, same approach. Because that protects you later on if somebody says, oh, they didn't do this, they didn't do this. Well, you get a good defense if they do that. Okay, good question. So in the context,
thing, yes.
Yeah, so here's what we are seeing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And I don't know who else is on this right now, but I'm venturing to guess a lot of the people who are on are Indian.
We have a few people watching it, so thank you, Anjum. Thank you for joining.
Yeah. So Cisco, and we all know Cisco, a big company, IT company in the Silicon Valley, has been sued.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. An Indian employee has sued because one of its vice presidents or C-level executives is also Indian, but they have sued for discrimination based upon religion, even though they both are Indian. But what they're doing, and they apparently both are Hindu, but one of them but they're using caste.
Caste, oh my God! So within Hindu,
So we're seeing within the Indian community, some people now saying, I'm not a different caste as this.
Really?
Apparently the C-level executive is a Brahmin, and the one who is suing supposedly is lower caste. And they're trying to make this into an issue.
Oh my God.
And saying, why didn't you get promoted, and why didn't you do this, and why didn't you?
Is going to suffer because of all this.
Yes. And so the answer to that question, by the way, can they sue on that basis? Probably yes. And even though we're the same origin, the religion, although we know Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, nothing is based upon caste. If you're Hindu, you're Hindu. It doesn't make a difference if you're a Brahmin or Vaishnava or whatever. However, he's trying to thread a needle in that lawsuit. Okay. And part of it is this. Okay. You see in Florida, I'm giving an example of what we see in Florida.
Right.
It's not religion, but it's based upon origin. So especially in South Florida, there's Latinas, Latinos, Hispanics, Cubans, Colombian, Nicaraguans, Haitians, right? Now, they all work together. One is in supervisor, one is not. So if one is Colombian and one is Cuban, generally speaking, they all are Spanish orientation. If you want to take about language, their orientation is more generally Hispanic or Latino, but there are differences between those communities, and they fight a lot internally. And so we have seen lots of cases based upon national origin discrimination, harassment, where you have a Nicaraguan supervising a Cuban or vice versa, for example, Honduran, whatever. And those cases are allowed by the courts to proceed. So if you analogize that same scenario to the caste argument, it can probably go forward, even though it seems ridiculous. Okay, but what I'm saying is this. That's a long way of saying this. There are a number of Indian-dominated companies in America now, okay, where the executives, even middle management, even those at the bottom, probably 60%, 70% are all Indians, okay, and the minority are non-Indians, okay. I have a number of clients who are oriented that way, and which is great. But we now need to become savvy that even our own people can find ways to sue us.
Right.
For reasons that we never would have dreamed about.
Correct.
And so part of the training that I'm starting to do for some of these Indian-oriented businesses is sensitivity training leading to things like cultural issues.
Wow.
We're seeing two different cultural issues with Indian.
And you cannot put those cultural issues into any handbook.
Yeah. So let me give you an example. Two types. One is like this casteist issue.
Right.
Okay, superiority and not and whatever, bogus things. The other is those who are from India managing those who are Indian origin who have been born and raised here, or vice versa. Because that cultural issue also causes misrepresentation or misunderstandings.
That's true.
And so some of the training I'm doing is a lot about that issue.
Right.
You know, I was born and raised here, but I have been able to maintain a lot of our traditions thanks to my parents. I can see how my parents' generation feels and communicates about things, and I understand how they feel. And I also know how people in my son's generation feel about things.
That's
you know, there's this disconnect.
Yeah.
That they think that we're heavy-handed, or they think that, you know, we're not. We don't care. The younger people think that we you know, they don't care about anything. You know, it's this weird dynamic right now. So it's something that if you're hiring a lot more Indians, whether from India or whether here, it's something to be mindful of, because people are now, you know, it's easy to look at the other person as the bad guy. But now we are the other person for our own community.
Right.
You know, and unfortunately, a lot of the younger generation in our communities, not unfortunately, it's reality. It doesn't mean it's unfortunate, but those in our upper 40s, 50s, 60s, and older who are running businesses need to be mindful that we're dealing with people from a different generation.
That's true.
So our old style management that we were used to, you know, my father can tell me what to do, and I can do it in an instant. Yeah. You and I won't question what our father or our manager told us to do.
That's true.
But these kids will question everything.
Absolutely.
And they don't have a concern about questioning.
No, they don't have any fear, any heditation.
It's just good. Yeah, I'm actually proud that they are not concerned, that they feel bold. However,
enlightened from the day one.
Yeah, exactly. And then the problem is that those who are from a different generation, a different culture, take offense. How are you questioning me? I have 25 years more experience than you do. I know what I'm talking about. And it becomes a problem. So these are the sorts of sensitivity trainings that should be done.
That's fantastic. So, you know, I think if we have almost an hour coming along, we have a few more minutes. So I wanted to ask the final question about EEO laws on harassment and hostile working environment, because, you know, I was just curious because of this entire work from home and remote working. I'm sure the sexual harassment cases must have gone down, or what's the situation? Are there any changes in that law, and how is it? Is it broader now, or what does it include? Gender discrimination?
Yeah.
Anything special going on? Because that's the only thing we hear in the EO, like emails you receive, or sometimes what's going on, which the cases which blow up.
Yeah, no, good question. Yes. So the U.S. Supreme Court recently, just 10 days ago, expanded the scope of what is considered to be discrimination in the country. Mm-hmm. So gender discrimination has been prohibited since 1964.
Right.
Okay. So is race discrimination, national origin, religion. Age discrimination became prohibited as of 1970, 72. Then disabilities, people who have physical disabilities or ill, is also prohibited. Disability-based discrimination is also prohibited. And we know sexual harassment is a form of gender discrimination. Any form of harassment, right, disability, race-based, religion-based, is all illegal. Now, as of 10 days ago, the federal law has expanded to include protections for those who are of different sexual orientation.
Oh, okay.
So if you're gay, lesbian, or, one of those iterations, right, transgender, whatever, you're now also protected by the anti-discrimination laws of the country for the first time. Okay. So a lot of states had prohibited it. California, Massachusetts, many states had prohibited sexual orientation discrimination. But as a nation, we had not up until the U.S. Supreme Court's decision a couple of weeks ago. So anybody who...
Because now video has become new normal. So everything is on video. People are recording it. So I was just curious how they are taking this entire, the harassment policy. Is it in a new normal? Is it going to be changing, or I don't think so.
Yeah, we do need to update. So if your harassment policies have not been updated recently, they will need to be updated because the law has evolved. One of the other things that I have, usually I have included sexual orientation even when it wasn't prohibited by federal law because we knew it was only a matter of time. So I was trying to get ahead of the curve. But if you haven't had it included in your handbooks, then we need to update that. But a couple of things to be mindful of. This is another critical point. The transgender movement, which is out there, people who don't know what gender they are so they can use either bathroom, that sort of thing is happening. There is also a movement where they now refer to themselves by different pronouns. He, she, they, them. He, them, he, they, she, them, like that. Or just, and it's shocking to those of us because we've never had to use those pronouns.
That's true.
What do you mean by they?
Right.
Either he or she.
Yeah.
But now because it has been allowed and transgender is a protected category,
right.
I've had people ask me to draft their contracts, whether business contracts, employment contracts, or whatever, to use pronouns.
Right.
Okay. As opposed to he or she. Now we got to say they or them or whatever because it's affecting a transgender potentiality. And so it's going to take an adjustment for society to evolve. There's no doubt. But critical point is this. Because they are now protected by law, anti-discrimination, if you have a supervisor or if you're a business owner and you have somebody who comes to you and is transgender and they start being critical of you or saying, hey, I don't want to be called she, I want to be called they, I want to be, or whatever. And we start now making fun of that or we give pushback to that, that could potentially be harassment based upon transgender or some sort of gender stereotype leading to gender discrimination.
Right.
So be careful. This is an avenue. This is a brand new aspect to law that just came out. But I'm going to caution all employers that I know it's shocking. I know it's hard for most people to realize I need to call some people by a different pronoun now. But in the workplace, please don't make light of it or make fun of it because it can lead to a hostile working environment claim.
No, that's fantastic. I think we covered most of the issues in today's any final thoughts you have before we wrap up this? I think people really like it, and they are going to like it when they are going to hear it more and more. how important it is to have HR staffing strategies and HR and labor laws, and as an employer you should be mindful of certain changes which is happening across the board. So thank you very much, and I think we are going to have one more session where we would be talking about specifically what changes we can do for medical practices just in handbook. But today I think we covered a lot of topics for small businesses, and this is going to be a wonderful video for people to watch. And
I appreciate the time, and anytime you get questions about people wanting to hear more about certain topics, just let me know. I'd be happy to come back.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much, Nikhil, and thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.